Good morning, everybody. My name is Damon Levine, and I'm a facilitator here at Prude. And I want to welcome you to the first session of Prude's Black History Month speaker series. So this is a series of free, interactive online talks by presenters from around the province who are going to share with you stories on many subjects related to both Black history in New Brunswick, as well as the present-day Black community here. This is going to include talks on subjects ranging from Black loyalists and refugees to entrepreneurship and personal uplift. We're going to have some poetry reading as well, which of course brings us to our first guest, Mr. Clyde Wray. Now, let me just say a few things about Clyde. I'm sure many of us know Clyde. Clyde's the author of 4 books of poetry. He's also a producer, a director, a playwright, and a performer. He's had his work performed in such places as New York City, Los Angeles, Denmark, Halifax, and right here in our own St. John. So, although he's a New York City native, Clyde is really very much the consummate maritimer. He and his wife Kelly and their 3 children, Astrid, Shasta, and Nikolai, live right here in St. John. So, without further ado, everyone, please welcome Mr. Clyde Wray.
Well, good morning. Good morning. How is everyone out there in virtual land? I'm honored to be the first for Prude to share with you a few of my works, and then to talk about a program that we're engaged in. It's called We Were Here. But first, I'd like to do a piece that I had written back in June of 2019. And it speaks to the fact that we all come from someplace else. This is entitled, We May Not Be Indigenous, but we embrace you the way the sun embraces us. Though many of us come from afar, we collectively shower on you words that glow, because you've accepted us, Canada. You've allowed us to make Canada our new home. We embrace you with open arms, that we may be fruitful and treat you as if you were our very own. We may not be indigenous, born to this land of the free, but our loyalty to you will forever be steadfast and unwavering. We may not speak the same language, our customs may be strange, but we yearn to be fully included. Given time, we shall learn. You'll see, Canada, your investment will have a good return. We embrace you. Your national anthem has become ours. Our hope is we can all stand together, bright as the northern star. We embrace you, Canada, and thank you for embracing us. Most of all, thank you, Canada, for giving us your trust. That was a piece I had written some time ago with the hope that we all understood that we all come from someplace else and we come to Canada and we treat her the way we want to be treated. I am a New Yorker, and one of the reasons I came to Canada and stayed here is because people spoke. I always found that strange, and even today when I walk down the street, I find it strange that people will speak. Being from New York, people don't speak, they pass you by quickly. And as I said earlier, here that it's Black History Month, it just so happens that I've written some pieces of vignettes that we are going to be putting up at the St. John Theatre Company, live streaming, and perhaps if the pandemic allows us to have live audiences. I'd like to do another piece, and it's entitled No Longer Slaves. They left not knowing what lay before them, except the wide expanse of the blue ocean, storms, gales, and for many, terrible bouts of seasickness. The waves crested and the seas rolled. They rode on the faith of the Quakers, the first wave, the first 1,000, the first of the Black Loyalists. They rode the tall ships high on the waves, the white spray splashing against the hulls of the ships. 1783 was the departure of the first 1,000 of the Black Loyalists. They knew nothing of nautical miles, celestial navigation, or how to tell direction under the stars as they rode out into the deep blue seas. They rode on the faith of the Quakers, the first wave of the Black Loyalists, still loyal to the king. They rode for their independence. They rode out of bondage. Like the salty taste of the ocean, they could smell and taste the fresh flavor of freedom. The waves crested and the seas rolled. As the waves lapped along the sides of the hulls of the ships, the sails billowed in the bright morning sun. The night tides carried them further and further along, further out to sea. The first wave that rode on the faith and the promise of the Quakers, the first 1,000 of the Black Loyalists. They would reach a new place called Canada, a new place to begin again, a new place to call home. But until then, for them, the waves crested and the seas rolled. The waves crested and the seas rolled until they reached the St. John Harbor and their new place they could call home. I had an inspiration for that, having visited the Loyalist house here in St. John. And often I'm amazed at the fact that there aren't as many depictions of how many people arrived here, be they Lebanese or black, white. We all came from someplace else. And I have a piece that I will do that speaks to that, and it's entitled The Old Port City. She is often visited by dignitaries. They come by trade winds to bear witness to her charms, to be lulled gracefully, fully to the warmth of her welcoming arms. It's historic how she grows on you, as ancient as the city itself, a blend of modernism and history, a cultural icon that doesn't live on a shelf. She showers you with colors that spring up from the Fundy Bay. Her artisans have much to choose from. After all, that is the St. John way. A proud heritage of Aboriginal, Irish, French, Loyalists, the newest of immigrants, passed down by bagpipe, fiddle, drum. If you listen carefully, you can hear it in the songs the old and the new Maritimers hum. And even though we've got fog, we live, stand, and breathe as though we have a wealth of sun, with pride and a simple belief. The old port city of St. John comes in second to none. I did that some years ago. I've often been very proud of being here in St. John. But one of the things that annoyed me to no end was those posters or portraits that were on the wall in Canterbury Street, because I've often asked myself the question, didn't someone of color, any particular color, do something that was created here in St. John that St. Johners could be proud of. And that's how I came to do We Were Here, a series of vignettes that going to be put up at the St. John Theater Company about successful Black entrepreneurs, people who came here that were slaves, some that were born here, that were very successful, and I mean very successful. So we are doing and portraying and bringing their stories to life here in St. John. And I'm very happy to say that Damien is one of the participants in this particular production, which I hope you'll all come out and see, which we are also going to be streaming. So I wish this was a two-way kind of thing, and perhaps we could get some questions if we have some. Is that possible? Hello? Oh, and I should say that Prude and Ralph Thomas have been very instrumental in bringing some of these stories to life. They have some great research up there. Hello?
Hello, Clyde. Can you hear me? It's Damon. How are you?
Yes. Hey, Damon. How are you?
Hey, Clyde. Well, I'll just get some things started off here. So, would imagine that many people in St. John know you and know a bit about your story. But can you just tell us a little bit about about your background, particularly? Now, I know you're a soldier, correct? You were in the U.S. Army, is that correct?
That's correct.
And are you a Vietnam combat veteran?
Yes, that's correct. Also,
okay.
Well, my story is rather long. It's not as brief.
Sure. Well,
I'm from New York City, Chelsea, as a matter of fact. That would be 27th Street and 10th Avenue. That's Manhattan.
Yes.
And I went to a military school, and I had the good fortune of surviving the Vietnam War. I used to work for the United States Border Patrol. I was a garbage collector, or as I like to say, a sanitation engineer. I've had many occupations, and certainly this is as I came to writing it, I came by the scenic route. I think I had to do so many things that I had to gain the experience to be able to sit down and write.
Sure, and that's often said about people in the arts. There might be a brilliant young artist who is quite good at the craft, but hasn't really lived enough life to sort of put some life into their art. But you would say that you've lived quite a bit of life, and what you write about and create is quite deep. Would you say that?
I wouldn't. I don't know that I use the terminology deep. I leave that to other people. But I do have what I would like to think of as a wealth of experience. Raina Marie Rilke once wrote, "If you've had a poor childhood, maybe you have nothing to write about." So I mean, you should be able to go all the way back and glean something that you should be able to write about. And like I said, I took the scenic route, and with many occupations, and that includes being homeless at one time, having to live off the street, which I am not unashamed to say. But I mean, I had a friend once back in Washington, D.C., a short story writer friend of mine. We used to critique each other's work. And at one point I went to him and said, Tim, I'm really not feeling very good about my work. And Tim asked me, well, how many pieces did you write this month? Because I hadn't written anything in 3 days. And Tim said to me, he asked the question, how many pieces did you write? And I said, oh, about 30, 40. And he said, well, sometimes you got to let the well fill back up. And I thought that might have been one of the more profound things I had heard somebody say to me up until that point, because I always thought you were supposed to write every day.
Right.
And So he gave me a shot of wisdom, which I never failed to share.
Which, of course, is back off a bit, let the well fill up, as you said,
Yes.
and come back at it fresh.
Come back at it fresh. Anytime you sit down and write, I believe you give out a piece of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Somewhere in there's a piece of you,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
if you're always giving it out, then you have to let something come back.
Clyde, so you've talked about you've had various occupations in law enforcement and various things like that. So were you always creating, like when you were a soldier in the fields of Vietnam, or when you were working as a border guard, were you always creating? Were you always doing something? How did this? Where did the art come from?
As I said, I went to a military school, and we had what we called a sister school, a girls' school across the road, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I used to write the love letters for the guys. they would pay me.
Right, of course. That does seem like an old war movie trope. There's always that one soldier in like an old war movie who always writes the love letters back to the guys girls back home.
Well, it's true.
Yeah,
So now you know it's true. That does happen. There's always going to be that guy who's a wordsmith of some sort.
Sure.
And he's going to, someone will ask to write the letter. And of course, that's when we had paper and pen, right?
Mm.
So, yeah, and it took some time. And but those were the days of paper and pen.
Sure, of course. Now, you've talked about that. So essentially, you've been creative your whole life. You touched on it a bit, and obviously, it's probably quite a long story and a detailed story. But just can you give us a sort of the Cliff Notes version of how you got from U.S. border guard to maritime Canada? I know you lived in Nova Scotia for a bit.
Yeah.
Why Canada?
Actually, I arrived here to give a lecture at Dartmouth High in Nova Scotia, in Halifax. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that kept me here at the time was that and people, I suppose people will find this very funny. I had a play running in Los Angeles at the time. I directed the play, and it was up, and it was produced, and it was running. And at that point, they don't need you anymore, right? Mm-hmm. So I came here to Canada to give this lecture at Dartmouth High School. And the weather was beautiful in Halifax. And of course, it was before it blew up and to become cosmopolitan.
Right.
And as I was walking down the street often, people spoke, and I thought it was some sort of anomaly. Mm-hmm. Quite frankly, people spoke. They would say hi or good morning or whatever it was. And so I decided I'd stay for a little while and enjoy the weather. And I was staying with a friend, and then I found a hostel to stay in.
Right.
And I just stayed, and that's where I met my wife.
Okay.
18 years ago.
Okay, it was a love connection. That's a nice story.
No, yes, it was. It was a very nice story.
But we have a question from Robin in our audience. She'd like to know when the play We Were Here is going to run.
And we're in the middle of this pandemic, and they keep changing the rules. Now, it was supposed to start on the 23rd. But we may have to move it to live stream. We are going to live stream it from the 25th to the 27th. So mm-hmm. It's still open at the moment whether or not we'll be able to put people in the seats, which would start on the 23rd, I think. Mm-hmm. But if not, we're going to live stream it from the 25th to the 27th.
Okay. You heard that, Robin. So 25th to the 27th, St. John Theater Company. There is a whole section on their website about the production. And if we are fortunate, if COVID allows us, we'll actually put it on live beginning the 23rd. But if not, then definitely the 25th to the 27th. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And we have some I would like to think, some very interesting people whose lives we are going to be presenting. I think that a lot of people will be very surprised that they don't know who these people are. I think you will be very surprised.
Mm-hmm. Clyde, can you tell us a bit about some of the people? I would love to talk about my character, but because it is your your speaker series, you definitely tell us about some of the characters that you think people will want to know about.
Well, I'll give a hint because I'd rather have them come out and see it. Uh, there is a character they call the Ice Lady. And unknown to many people, this woman, who she was married to a runaway slave, had
Right.
a monopoly on Lily Lake ice. That's all I'm willing to say. Now, why
Okay.
you don't know her is beyond me.
What about Canada's first black lawyer, a St. Johnner called Abraham Beverly or A.B.
Yeah,
Walker, right?
uh,
And A.B.
Abraham Beverly Walker, for you pub crawlers, and you'll hear that term. Uh, his first office building was down at the Ritchie Building, which is, for those of you who don't pub crawl, is where O'Leary's is at. You know, so, and Cornelius Sparrow, who had a fantastic restaurant here and these Cornelius Sparrow also was a runaway slave. Abraham Beverly Walker, I believe, was born here in St. John. I'm not, but so we have some. I think we have what would be considered an educational piece also, which I hope eventually winds up in schools because obviously it's not in the school books.
Mm-hmm.
But like most history or Black history, it's sketchy. You have to piece this together. You have to research who these people were. It's not like there's a school book full of this information.
Mm-hmm. Glad. Do you think it's interesting? Do you find it sort of ironic, interesting that a lot of the people that uh, are sort of portrayed in your play are former Black Americans, they being Black American slaves who did a runner north on the Underground Railroad to get the freedom here in Canada, and you've done your own sort of runner north, as it were.
By choice. Nobody was chasing me.
Yeah, exactly. It's a bit different, right?
I would say. Yeah. You know, when I was here's I think a little interesting story. One of the things that I found when I say I took the scenic route, when I was 17 years old, I asked my mother if I could go down to South Carolina with a friend of mine to make some money for the summer.
Mm-hmm.
And so we went down. My mother said, "Oh, that's fine. Just go on down." So I thought, well, okay. And they lived in rural South Carolina, and I went to pick cotton, and
Okay.
I went to pick tobacco. And I will tell you this, and I can't think of, it's very difficult to think of a polite way to say this. I don't know how anybody could do that. I was in the cotton field, and I think I must have worked about 15 minutes, told them I couldn't do it. And then they said, well, you can go over to the tobacco field. And I went to the tobacco field, and you don't pick tobacco from the top leaves, you pick it from the very bottom.
Mm-hmm.
And it's called Tobacco Row, right? Do
Yeah.
you realize that you are bent over picking tobacco? And guess what? I called my mother, told her to send me some bus fare, and went home. Now,
Yeah.
now I'm telling you that there's another way that I say that. This is my polite way of saying that. But I would have been one of those folks. They would have been been up in the tree hanging had they thought I could do that kind of work with the attitude I had.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. It's funny you say that because that makes it all the more interesting. Some of the people that are profiled in the play are people that got here, from slavery. They ran from slavery, but like they did that kind of work, and then they like walked from Virginia to New Brunswick.
Yeah,
I mean,
right, exactly.
You gotta have a will of steel.
Yeah, there's a character in one of the vignettes, and every time he comes to a particular line, I just shake my head. I don't know. It takes me back to my being 16 and 17 years old to understand how anybody can do that kind of work for 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
I just cannot wrap my head around it. It's just beyond my comprehension, how, and the only thing I can think about it when I think in those terms is there's only one word that allows you to think that those people could do that for that length of time is survival.
Yeah, absolutely.
It just you inherently must know that you have to survive.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And that's kind of a great way to sum up our presentation today, Clyde. Survival.
Okay.
Survival is very important, and the New Brunswick's Black community, these Black Canadians, have definitely been exemplars of the survival. They had to survive here when they came here from the United States, either as loyalists or as refugees. And Black History Month definitely honors their achievements and what they've built here. And your play, We Were Here, which is going to be streaming from the St. John Theater Company from the 25th through the 27th of February, also honors some leading lights of those early Black Canadians, Black St. Johners. Clyde, do you have anything you want to leave us with today?
Well, no, but I'd like to know, are there any questions that I can answer?
Sure. If anybody has any questions, feel free to just put them in the chat. Clyde, you probably know you have a lot of fans. Linda loves hearing your stories. Just wanted you to know that.
Oh, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, if there are no other questions, I want to thank Clyde on behalf of Prude, and I want to thank you, the audience, for attending our speaker series. Again, if you check out our website, which is speakerseries.prudeinc.org, you can see some of our upcoming talks. Again, we'll have talks on just various issues of interest to the St. John community, particularly the Black community, and really all of our neighbors. So again, I want to thank you for coming to our talk. And until the next time, thank you, Clyde.
And thank you for having me. Thank you
for having me.
And thank all those who took the time to listen. Take care and be well.
Thanks, Clyde. Cheers.
Cheers.